When we pick our skin, we get a sense of temporary but instant gratification, pleasure, and satisfaction when the skin or the scab has been removed, because it helps us to relieve the actual or the perceived imperfection on our skin. And perhaps that was maybe due to boredom or stress or anxiety or our depression or low mood, or because there was a tension or an urge. But it makes us feel so good when that discomfort is being released, when the blemish is off our skin. Did you know that during the process of this instant gratification or the relief or that feel-good feeling that we get when we get rid of the blemish on our skin by picking at it, a very important neurotransmitter is being released called dopamine, and that's the brain's pleasure reward system. And studies in rats in a box have shown that when they've been injected with chocolate, it increases their basal output of dopamine by 55%. And when they were injected with nicotine, it actually increases their basal output of dopamine by 150%. So perhaps when we also pick our skin, it will also increase our basal output dopamine levels. But I anticipate not as much as 55% as chocolates or nicotine, but it will release a certain amount. But this is the problem though, that the more we pick our skin and the more satisfaction and gratification that it leaves us feeling, then the more likely that the dopamine will be released in our body. And so it creates a vicious cycle. But you see, this is the problem, that the brain needs to balance the amount of dopamine in its system. And the more we pick our skin, the brain says, hey, hang on here. You're getting dopamine from a foreign act, which is the skin picking. And so the brain will say, well, I'm actually going to produce less dopamine now because the act of it or the anticipation of picking the skin is going to produce dopamine because it's giving you an instant gratification. So over time, the brain will say, well, every time you skin pick or the anticipation of picking your skin, because it produces pleasure and dopamine is released, the brain will say, well, I'm naturally going to produce less dopamine now because you're getting it from, an external source. And so over time though, the more you pick your skin and it creates this habit, the brain will say, well, I'm going to produce less dopamine, and hence the vicious cycle of you having to increase picking your skin in order to get the same satisfaction of picking the skin and actual amount of dopamine as it used to produce naturally. And so that's why it develops into a habit, and that's why it feels so good to continue to pick your skin as well. So why do we pick our skin? The current family, society, and cultural values tell us that to be beautiful, we need to have clear and blemish-free skin. From our social media to TikTok, Instagram, even our idols and movie stars and magazines show us constant pictures and videos and film of movie stars that tend to have just perfect skin. And so therefore, in order to feel like we fit in with society, to be attractive, to be wanted, and to experience pleasure and connection with other people, we also want to conform to these values and expectations, regardless of our skin condition. Our brain is also been designed to conform to our community in order to thrive and survive. Because if we feel that there's a perceived threat, perhaps there's a blemish on our skin and we want to get rid of it, our flight, and freeze response gets activated, and it tells us that it's uncomfortable and we want to do something to neutralize it as well. And so that's why we also tend to pick our skins. Some of the other reasons why we pick our skin includes our DNA. And it's part of our genes or neurological sensitivities to emotional and behavioral stimuli that can result in emotional impulsivity and a need to self-soothe as well. It could also be due to psychological reasons, because skin picking helps us to regulate uncomfortable emotions such as stress, anxiety, boredom, depression, and it can become a really behaviorally reinforcing coping mechanism to manage these uncomfortable feelings and thoughts as well. Another reason is because it's due to behavioural context features. For example, you might only skin pick in the privacy of your bathroom where there's a close-up mirror and under bright light conditions where you can really see the blemish close up. Whereas if the mirror is in the hallway and there's more people around and the mirror is further away and you can't see the closeness of your blemish, then you're less likely to skin pick in the hallway where the lighting conditions isn't as bright as well. So it depends on context features, but definitely more so when you're in the privacy of your own company where you can see close up your blemish. Some of the ways that you can manage your skin picking concerns would be to go and seek the help of a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist or psychologist so that we could individualize the treatment program to your individual needs, because everyone's journey is very different. So as part of the individual assessment, part of that would be to include a functional assessment where we look at the antecedents, some of the triggers that may be contributing to your skin picking, looking at the actual then behaviors associated with the skin picking itself in terms of context, and what are some of the consequences associated with the skin picking as well. And that may include instant gratification, the need to regulate really uncomfortable emotions, and if there's any indirect or direct consequences as well. We would also then, as a result of our individual assessment, would then recommend the appropriate treatment. And at the moment, the most evidence-based treatment for skin picking disorders include the habit reversal training program, evidence-based CBT, and ACT, which also looks at living within your values as well. So what are some of the practical strategies you can try while waiting for the individualized treatment with your psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, or psychologist? One of the first things that you can do is to reduce the sensation feeling that you get when you place your bare hands and nails to try and get rid of the blemish on your skin. So perhaps wearing gloves might reduce that sensation feeling that you get as well. And wearing gloves will also help you to reduce the skin infection on your skin. The other thing that you can try and do in the behavioral context is in the bathroom where you would normally try and get rid of your skin blemish, you might want to place a squishy ball in there and to squeeze that instead of wanting to get rid of your blemish and using that as your go-to, as your replacement behavior. Perhaps you might have an elastic band that you might want to pull instead. You might also want to involve and enlist the help of family and friends in the home to let them know that you're about to go into the bathroom where the context usually occurs where you try and get rid of the blemish on your skin, and ask them to help you I suppose be distracted with something else, particularly around, say, if it occurs around 6:30 or 7:30, then around that time or perhaps before you brush your teeth, to be able to accompany you and just watch you for the first couple of times and use that association because somebody else is there supporting you as well and not criticizing you. I think it's also important to comfort yourself and have some self-compassion and care in the statements that you're telling yourself as well. Instead of saying, oh, I'm so stupid and I'm so dumb for picking at it, you can say, look, I'm trying my best every day, and having the motivation to want to change my skin picking routine is enough. And if I do that for the next 5 days, then I will be really happy, rather than saying, I never want to pick my skin again, because that's a really high, unrealistic expectation. And we know that it's better to anticipate us picking or getting rid of the blemish by having, rather than having the wishful thinking that, I'm not going to pick at it at all. You might also want to engage in other activities around the times when you tend to skin pick, and that might mean exercising or keeping busy as well during the day, so that you can, I suppose, come home and feel, I suppose, more tired to be able to go to sleep instead of being bored as well. How can loved ones and caregivers support those that have the skin picking concerns and disorders? Well, one of the most important ways is to support them in your words and in your validation and in your encouragement and showing unconditional love. Harvard University has shown in a very important 75-year study that those who tended to be most happiest are those that had supportive relationships rather than the amount of wealth or material things that they possessed in their lives as well. So having supportive relationships is really important in the recovery of those with skin picking concerns. And how can you do that? Well, don't be critical. So when they do engage in their skin picking behaviors, not to be able to say, here you go, you're doing it again, how many times have I told you, you should know by now, but instead be really validating and perhaps be also very curious as well. I can understand how hard it is for you, son, to be able to try and stop, but I'm here for you if you need me. And to also show them unconditional love, that regardless of how often or the frequency, intensity and duration of them engaging in these behaviours, to show them that you love them no matter what they do or no matter what they look like, because your love for them is more than skin deep as well, and that they've got other interests, abilities and talents that define them rather than how they look on the outside as well. Also help them to become distracted by engaging in other activities that them away from the context where they would engage more frequently in picking at the skin or trying to get rid of the blemish. So maybe take them out for routines of exercise or healthy eating or engaging in other extracurricular activities. More so, help them with replacing their negative thoughts and their negative core beliefs about themselves. Perhaps is, I'm such a failure, I'm so defective, I'm not pretty enough, and maybe help with more validating and encouraging self-statements such as, I love you for the way you are on the inside, regardless of how you look on the outside. And those things are insignificant to your self-worth and your self-value, because I see you as being more important than how you look as well.